Ethan always noticed the small things. A pause too long, a smile too quick, a glance that lingered where it shouldn't. Lately, Vanessa's smiles came slower and never quite reached her eyes. It started subtly, a new ringtone she always rushed to answer. Her phone, once tossed casually onto the kitchen counter, was now clutched tightly, screen down. She stepped out to take calls, even in the middle of dinner. "Just work," she'd say with a wave, always too breezy. Too rehearsed. But Ethan wasn't the confrontational type. He didn't raise his voice or snoop. Instead, he wrote, quietly, in his journal, a worn black notebook he kept in the nightstand. He documented patterns, noted timelines, wrote questions he couldn't yet ask. Until one night, the answer found him. Vanessa was asleep beside him, back turned, her breath steady and shallow. Her phone lay out of reach, but her old iPad was still on the coffee table. Forgotten, a relic from before, when she had nothing to hide. Ethan picked it up, more out of habit than suspicion. It blinked to life with a single tap. Notifications cluttered the lock screen, but one stood out, cutting through the digital noise like a blade. "I miss last night already." His hand froze. Then, instinctively, he opened the Messages app. The iPad was still synced. There it was, a name he didn't recognize, M. Dozens of messages, flirty, intimate, far too comfortable to be just a friend. He didn't read them all. He didn't need to. The truth had a way of speaking loudest in fragments. He took screenshots, carefully, methodically. His heart pounded in his ears, but his hands moved with clinical precision. Like a surgeon documenting a diagnosis. Not because he doubted what he saw, but because he knew she'd lie. She would deny it. She always did. The next morning, nothing had changed. She kissed him goodbye, mascara perfect, heels clicking across the tile. Same curated image, same gentle lies. Ethan said nothing, just poured himself another cup of black coffee, opened his notebook, and wrote 3 words in neat block letters. "I miss last night." Then, underneath, "Let's see what else she's missing." Ethan became a man of patterns. Every morning, he sat at the kitchen island with his journal and a black coffee, no sugar, no cream. And every morning, Vanessa floated in like nothing was wrong, her tone light, her affection mechanical. She wore guilt like perfume, invisible but cloying once you knew what to smell for. He didn't confront her immediately. He wasn't ready for lies, not yet. Instead, he gave her space, enough rope, if he was honest. He needed to be sure. Not because he wanted more pain, but because doubt, he realized, was louder than truth. Doubt gnawed. Proof was silent. Vanessa became more guarded. She changed her phone passcode. She laughed at things she wouldn't explain. Once, Ethan watched her send a message, the ghost of a smile on her lips, then flip the screen down as he walked in. "Just a client," she offered. No name, no context. He waited until she left for her weekly Pilates class. Then he opened her laptop. It was careless of her, syncing devices. Ethan wasn't proud of how easily he found the rest: emails, calendar entries, a few iCloud photos. One hotel name repeated twice over the last month. Same day of the week. Midweek. Midday. It wasn't even subtle. She hadn't even tried. That night, Ethan made dinner, something she liked. Roasted salmon, lemon asparagus, garlic potatoes. He even opened a bottle of red they'd been saving for no occasion in particular. She arrived home at 7:30 sharp, looking surprised by the setup. "What's the occasion?" she asked, hanging her coat neatly. "You tell me," he said, setting her glass down. "Maybe there's something worth celebrating." Vanessa laughed nervously and reached for the wine. "You're being mysterious." "I've been noticing things," Ethan said, cutting into his food. "Changes. In your schedule. In how you talk. In how you don't talk." She blinked, caught off guard, then recovered fast. "Work's been intense lately. You know that." He nodded. "Sure. That's why you've been at the Hilton on Thursdays?" Her fork clinked against the plate. "What? The Hilton?" he repeated calmly. "Downtown. You've been there twice this month. Care to tell me why?" Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her napkin, dabbing at lips that hadn't taken a bite. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan reached under the table and pulled out his journal. From inside it, he slipped a few printed screenshots, messages, appointment confirmations, one unmistakable selfie she'd sent from the hotel room mirror. Her silence said more than denial ever could. I wasn't going to bring this up tonight, he said, voice quiet. But you keep looking me in the eyes like you deserve to. And I'm trying to figure out if the woman across from me is my wife, or just very good at pretending. Vanessa stared at the photos for a long time. Her breath caught. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The illusion had snapped, but even now, she fought for control. It wasn't physical, she said at last. It was emotional. We talked. We met up, yes. But it wasn't like that. Ethan kept his eyes on her. Not like what? She looked down at her wine. I needed something. I don't even know what. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, he said, still calm. And what you meant doesn't undo what you chose. The silence stretched. Then Vanessa said the one thing she thought might save her. It's over. I ended it, I swear. Ethan stared at her for a moment longer. Then he reached back into the journal and pulled out one more sheet. A photo. Hotel security footage. A timestamp. Yesterday. Vanessa's face went pale. And Ethan? He simply exhaled. Soft, steady, final. The silence after the last photo landed on the table was heavier than anything either of them had spoken. Vanessa stared at the printed image like it might dissolve if she didn't blink. Her perfectly painted nails trembled slightly as she reached for the glass of wine, but her hand stopped halfway. She wasn't thirsty. She was exposed. Ethan didn't press her. He didn't need to. The evidence had done the speaking, and now the silence was her turn to fill. She finally drew a breath, shallow and stuttering. I can explain. But even she didn't seem to believe it. Ethan remained still, his fork untouched, his expression unreadable. Go ahead. Vanessa's eyes darted from the wineglass to the journal and then to him, as if looking for a version of Ethan that might be easier to lie to. But the man across from her wasn't playing along anymore. He was present, alert, and dangerous in the quietest way. I didn't plan any of it, she began. It started with a conversation. He listened to me. He saw me. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. You'll say that's cliché, but when you're invisible long enough, even the wrong kind of attention feels like rescue. Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. Is that what this was? A rescue? Vanessa looked up sharply. No, I mean, not really. I didn't want to fall into anything. I just felt like I was disappearing. Ethan. You come home, you sit with your journal, you ask how my day was, but your eyes are already tired. I needed to feel alive? Ethan cut in. His voice wasn't angry, but it was stripped of anything soft. Because I read that in your messages. That he made you feel alive. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The words he quoted had once been whispered in digital privacy, sweet and careless. Now they echoed in the room like a slap. He leaned back in his chair, as though physically distancing himself from her presence. How many times? She hesitated. It wasn't regular. Sometimes once a week. Sometimes less. So not a mistake, he said. A routine. Vanessa's face flushed with shame. It wasn't just sex. I know, Ethan said. Sex would have been simpler. You didn't just betray the vows. You betrayed the intimacy. The friendship. I swear, I never meant to replace you, she said, her voice cracking. I just drifted. You don't drift into hotels, Vanessa, Ethan replied. You drive there. You check in. You undress. That's not a current dragging you. That's a compass you turned by choice. Vanessa's composure finally broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks, black mascara smudging at the corners of her eyes. She wiped them with trembling fingers but said nothing, no longer able to defend what had clearly collapsed. Ethan stood up and quietly collected the dinner plates. She flinched at the sudden clink of ceramic. The sound felt final. As he walked toward the sink, she stood too. I want to fix this, she whispered. Whatever it takes. Ethan turned to face her. His eyes were tired, but focused. Do you even know what this is anymore? She opened her mouth, but the answer wouldn't come. He shook his head slowly. I've spent months wondering if I was imagining it. Gaslighting myself into believing I was paranoid. Do you know what that does to someone who lives by intuition? I was afraid, she admitted. Of what it meant, of losing you. You lost me the moment you chose him over honesty, he said. And just like that, Ethan walked past her. Calm, decisive, like a man stepping out of a fog that had lasted too long. He paused at the foot of the stairs, turned slightly, and added, You should be afraid now. Because I'm no longer wondering. I know. The next morning, the house was too quiet. Even the birds outside seemed reluctant to sing, as if the silence between Ethan and Vanessa had soaked into the walls. Ethan stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the sun cut through the blinds in sharp lines. The journal sat beside him, closed for the first time in weeks. He didn't need to write anything today. He already knew the truth. Vanessa hadn't come to bed the night before. He hadn't expected her to. She had stayed downstairs, curled on the sofa like a guest too ashamed to ask for a blanket. Ethan had walked past her on the way to bed and not said a word. She was still there now, the outline of her body faintly visible under a throw blanket. Her makeup was smudged from where she'd cried herself to sleep, but Ethan didn't feel pity. Not anymore. What he felt was something colder, sharper, a kind of mental distance he couldn't have imagined just days before. At 8:10 a.m., Vanessa stirred. Ethan didn't turn around. She sat up slowly, as though the weight of last night had stiffened her entire body. "We should talk," she said softly. Ethan sipped his coffee. "We did. I mean really talk. About where we go from here." He turned to face her then, not angry, just steady. "Where do you think we go?" Vanessa looked down at her hands, picking at a loose thread in the blanket. "I don't want to lose this. Us. I was stupid and selfish, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But we've built a life together, Ethan. We have a history. That has to mean something." "It does," he agreed. "It means I trusted you enough to believe the lies." Her face twitched like she'd been slapped. "I'll go to therapy," she offered. "We can go together. I'll delete everything. I'll block him. You can go through my phone, whatever it takes." Ethan shook his head slowly. "You still think this is about him. But it's not. It's about who you became without telling me. It's about sitting across from a stranger every day and pretending not to notice the change." "I didn't mean to change," she said. "Of course you did," he replied. "People only hide who they are when they've already decided the truth won't be loved." Vanessa stood and crossed the room, but Ethan stepped back. "Don't. I just want to." "You want to be absolved," Ethan said flatly. "You want to skip the part where I get to feel anything but compassion for you. But I'm still bleeding. You don't get to decide when I heal." She swallowed hard, her voice smaller now. "So what happens next?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked around the room. The breakfast nook where they used to sit and plan vacations, the wall calendar with half the dates scribbled in her handwriting. Everything felt borrowed now, like a staged version of someone else's marriage. He set the coffee mug down gently and walked toward the stairs. "I need space. That's what happens next." Vanessa followed, but only with her eyes. "You're leaving?" He didn't stop walking. "I'm reclaiming peace. Whether that means leaving or just not listening to your apologies for a while, we'll see." As he disappeared upstairs, she finally broke. Not with words, but with the sound of quiet sobbing that filled the hollow places where love used to live. And upstairs, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, finally opening the journal again. He wrote only one sentence. "There's no heartbreak like realizing the person beside you stopped choosing you long ago." It was almost noon when Ethan zipped up the overnight bag. He didn't rush. Every folded shirt, every tucked-in sock felt deliberate, less about escape, more about reclaiming control. There was no anger in his movements, only clarity. That was the real turning point, he realized, not the betrayal, not even the lies, but the moment when the confusion finally evaporated. Vanessa stood in the doorway, arms folded, face drawn. Her usual poise was gone. No makeup, no defense, just the shell of a woman trying to memorize a man who was already gone in every way but physical. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't look up from the bag. "Somewhere I don't have to question reality every time someone says, 'I love you.'" She flinched like the words had cut her, but she didn't argue. She knew better now. When he finished packing, he walked downstairs, past the living room where so many of their memories lived like ghosts. He paused at the dining table, the same one where, just days ago, the truth had shattered the illusion of their life together. He slipped his wedding ring off slowly, as if even metal needed time to accept the shift. Then he placed it carefully in the center of the table, not out of cruelty, but symbolism. This was where it had all come undone, and this was where it ended. Vanessa followed him to the door but kept her distance. "Ethan, if you ever..." He held up a hand. Don't let this moment mean something. Don't dilute it with hope. Outside, the sun was bright, the world moving forward without hesitation. Ethan stepped out, bag in hand, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty hallway. As he reached the car, he took one last glance at the house. It looked the same, but it wasn't home. Not anymore. Sliding into the driver's seat, he started the engine and exhaled deeply. There was no dramatic music, no movie-style montage. Just a man, quietly choosing peace over pretense. And as he drove away, his voice echoed in his own mind, soft but firm. Some truths come softly, some hit like thunder. Either way, they change everything.